Hey guys, what's up? It's Tom. Welcome to the Jet Life podcast. My name is Tom Lelyo, and I'm your ultimate jet guide. This podcast episode is actually going to be excerpts from a recording of a conversation I had with a potential buyer that had a couple of really good questions, especially if you're looking to buy a private jet and put it with a charter company, try to offset your costs, maybe generate some revenue. All of your questions are going to be answered in this episode. So sit back, relax, enjoy the episode, and connect with me by going to theultimatejetguide.com, where I have a free PDF just for you if you're looking to buy a private jet. Schedule a call, and I look forward to working with you.
I appreciate the phone call. I appreciate the kind words on the content we're putting out there. So just so I understand, we're probably, like you said, 12 to 16 months out from making a move, and you're just kind of getting all your ducks in a row.
Yeah, so I don't know. Do airframes expire? I'm guessing they do. Like, is the wings expire? Like, oh, this one's going to have a wing that stays on forever. This one can go through 30,000 landings before the frame is shot. I don't know those kind of things. And that's the reason I'm calling you.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't usually find ones that are, like 20,000 hour, very light jet, citation 5. Like, I just, I've seen 13, I've seen 12, 11, and those are kind of up there. But, usually it's the engines that'll conk out before the airframe.
Right. How long does an airframe last?
I haven't really seen many that conk out, other than it becomes unable to have parts availability. So the reason that they get parked is not because the airframe is, shut, so to speak. It's just maybe like, okay, the avionics aren't supported anymore, the engines aren't supported anymore, the manufacturer's out of business, that kind of a thing. So the airframe, the tube itself is pretty rugged. And then with the citation line, they have inspections that once they get, and all the lines, they have inspections that once they get to the higher airframe times, they just kind of adjust their maintenance schedule.
Okay.
So maintenance is more like, same time is more along the line of like how much it's been flown, more so than how much life is left in it.
Okay.
I appreciate you checking out this video. Before I continue, I want you to go to theultimatejetguide.com, where I've put together a full guide for jet buyers like yourself.
So then, which planes will have a longer run of parts if we're looking at, a much older jet?
Well, yeah, we're gonna play in that playground. I mean, we're gonna look at Falcon 50s. We're gonna look at Hawker 800s, Citation XLs, XLSs, and Lear 60s. So between those four, they're all going to be under $4 million in that vintage, 80s, 90s sort of thing, under $4 million. Now, at the top of that price range, you have the Citation XL, XLSs. The reason it's at the top there is because Textron's is still around. They're still supporting the airframe. Pilot availability is strong. Parts availability is strong. It's the Apple, if you will, of the companies when it comes to the mid-sized jets. And so you pay that premium for that. The downside is it's not going to have the speed or the range of the other ones. The cabin's going to be a little bit smaller. We're talking like, maybe 3 to 4 inches less wide. So I don't want you to think it's a lot smaller. It's still going to fit 8 people, but it's just a little bit of a thinner tube that, depending on who you have, may or may not, make a difference. So that's kind of the top of that range would be like looking at the Citation XLs or the XLSs. I've worked with Southern Sky Aviation in the past. Barry Lambert, he was like 2 episodes ago. He does kind of what Justin does, but with the Citation XLSs. It has a pretty good program there, so that's an option. The other option would be, then the next step down is usually Hawkers. Hawkers are fantastic workhorses, especially for charter. They're the biggest cabin, biggest feeling cabin out of all of them. Their maintenance schedule is based on calendar, so you can run them like workhorses, and they do really well on charter because of that. But the problem with the Hawkers is they're kind of picked over right now. They're hard to find, especially at a competitive price point. But they will be a little bit cheaper than the Citations. It's just a matter of finding them. So I've got a couple operators that will work with Hawkers. They're very popular from the operator perspective. And then you kind of move your way down to like the Lears and the Falcons. You know, they're a little bit older. The Lear has a great cabin. It's super fast. But now we're talking about dispatch rates. You know, the dispatch rate for the Falcons a little bit less than the Hawkers. And obviously, if it can't dispatch of either parts or pilot availability or maintenance schedule, then that starts to erode into your bottom line. So it's kind of, you know, where do you want to? We can find deals on all of them, but in terms of like operation costs and that sort of thing, that's where you kind of have to, you know, figure out which camp you want to be in. Do you want to roll the dice on, you know, a Citation and pay the premium to get something in that range, or do you like the Falcons and the Lear 60s that, you know, you can still make money off them? It's going to be a lower acquisition cost, but you're rolling the dice in terms of you know, downtime and availability, especially with the Falcon. Well, not the Falcon so much, but especially the Lears and the Hawkers. The operators are now in a position where they're starting to phase them out, and they're looking at the newer models of the Hawkers and Lears.
Yeah. So here's a question then: if the plane, let's say, costs me a bunch of money, breaks even, or makes me money, does that come down to the plane you buy, or the person operating it, or the ability for them to market, or a little of all three?
Yeah, it is a little of all three. It comes down to the plane you buy, insofar as the exact unicorn serial number snowflake that you buy. So we can find you like the greatest Hawker in the world, right? And you know, get a great deal, and this thing just goes on forever, and it's a workhorse, it's a moneymaker. Versus, well, what if we spent $2 million more and got like the quote unquote premium Citation, and meanwhile we come to find out that this thing's got bugs in it and it can never fly, you know, more than, you know, 2 days at a time, and then it's down, you know, for so, you know, there's good Hawkers, there's bad Hawkers, there's good Citations, bad Citations. So picking the right make and model would really come down more to the right operator, and it's the right operator that has a business model that, you know, when the plane is flying, it's making money. And then the third piece that you mentioned is when how do they get it flying? You know, do they have the demand and the marketing and sales acumen to actually get a plane flying? And all the guys that I work with, they do have that. And what's interesting, it's not just about their ability to charter to, you know, consumers that are going, you know, from Ohio to St. Thomas, you know, for the weekend, but also the smart guys that are building in, okay, well, how do we partner up with, you know, a Wheels Up, you know, or another company that maybe they need some, you know, additional support, or how do we partner up with business and executive air travel with companies that have ongoing, you know, needs. For example, I've got an operator that works with that are going to the Space Coast for the space program. You know, so you have everything from Virgin to SpaceX to you know, Amazon. Like, they're all, you know, they need their executives to be flying from somewhere into that Space Coast area on a regular basis, and so they have contracts for that. So that's even a whole other world of you know, how operators can fly. So it comes down to all three.
Okay. Is there an advantage to starting with the plane or the operator?
I like starting with the operator, especially if you're kind of jet agnostic, which you kind of described. You know, you want to make sure that this thing makes as much money as possible. So basically, you're looking to buy a business, and you know, you want to find the right business partner. You know, whether, you know, if you're buying a restaurant, you don't care if it's an Italian, Asian, you know, Indian cuisine. You don't care. You just care, you know, who the operator is and if they're going to be successful with whatever's on the menu. So the way that I usually approach this is, let's keep talking. Let me answer your questions. You're on the YouTube channel already, so you're getting a lot of information, which is good because time, energy, and effort getting to know kind of the background of it. And then we start introducing you to the operators. There's 3 or 4 operators that I'll find, based on, our conversations. And, we'll have an hour conversation with each of them, kind of pick their brain, see who you like better, have another round or 2 of conversations. And then after 2 or 3 rounds of conversations with the operators, now we're getting back to it and saying, okay, is this direction you want to go in? And if let's choose an operator. And then at that point, when you choose an operator, that's where I'm going to come to you and ask you, say, hey, I'm happy to keep working with you. Here's my cost for the acquisition of the airplane. And I'm going to work for you to acquire that airplane along with the operator. And we split that cost between us, so that you're paying for me to find the aircraft, you're paying for, the operator to investigate and make sure that aircraft is for their business model as well. We go through that process. We purchase the aircraft. The operator, put it through on the certificate, so it has to go through a few conformity checks for that, and that takes a couple of weeks. And then all in all, we're probably 6 to 9 months out from getting something up and running.
Okay. Now, things that's this old, we're talking this old of a plane, that it's, 70, 90% depreciated from the original cost, or whatever that, 60 to 90% depreciated. Is there any favorable terms to get a loan, or do I need to come up with cash for the whole, $3 million?
Oh, no, we can find loans on these, this isn't too bad if you're buying the whole plane. We've got there are lenders that are agreeable to, they want to see that it's on engine programs. They're probably looking at hold on, let me take a look. I've got one. Let's see if I have it in here. All right, so I will tell you, these lenders were for another client. Usually they want it to be less than 20 years at the age of maturity of the loan. They want the engines on an engine program. You're looking at 7-8% on the loan. Some of the
So if we're talking, if we go ahead and make let's say a 17-year-old jet, that brings the price up dramatically, doesn't it?
We can keep
better than that 17-year-old.
Well, this lender, the reason I'm giving you these numbers is because this is the ballpark this client was looking in. I'm just going to give you this. So I have lenders that will go older planes. So just imagine this for an older plane. But yeah. Usually, so if you went to a Bank of America, all day, no older than 20 years old. But we've got guys that will do this. Just kind of give you a ballpark. But the other part of it is actually, here's one that's no age. Another bank, no age limit, engines on programs. They only do a max 5-year term. Here's another that's a max 7-year term. They're looking at mid-20 to 30% of the valuation of the aircraft for the money down. And then there's some that'll do fixed rates that'll be cheaper. There's some that'll do variable. If you do a fixed rate, then there might be a prepayment penalty with, but the variable, you don't have a prepayment penalty. So there's definitely different ways to do it.
So then the one last question I have for you is, if we buy this jet, let's just for giggles say it's 25 years old, okay, or whatever the number is. How long will that jet really realistically remain in service? Is this kind of a thing that, well, people will keep coming up with new ways to innovate the instrument panels or the avionics or, the engines, and this thing could go, like you hear about, people flying these Cessnas from the 50s and 60s, will we in 30 years still be flying planes from the 80s?
Well, I mean, if this based on what we've kind of discussed, it sounds like this is more of a. Okay, let me put it this way: most of my operators, I have one of my operators that is very specific. That when he has an owner that wants to buy a plane, put it on charter, and do that, go this route, it is I believe it's a 5 or 6 year cycle. So he doesn't plan on keeping it for more than 5 or 6 years. And based on that cycle, there's an exit strategy to sell the jet at that point in time as well. So if you're looking at this from the perspective of a charter operator and putting it on a charter operator certificate and trying to make money off of it, you're going to be, I would, let's focus on the next 5 or 6 years, because we're not going to hold on to an asset much longer than that. It just wouldn't make any sense to do business, with that. The operators aren't going to keep that's why a lot of operators don't use 1977, citations, 500s or 501s on their certificate. There's very few. Some do, but they went with the new ones, the CJs.
So here's my question then. What happens at the end of that cycle? Do we trade this plane off on something else? Does it just get scrapped?
No, it likely won't get scrapped. It'll likely just go to a 91 user or, a charter company that's kind of starting out, a charter company that doesn't have the clout to go and buy the newest, nicest, mid-sized jet. They can only afford the mid-sized jet that, is a little bit older, and it's going to require more elbow grease as they kind of build up their charter certificate. So it's kind of just the natural ebb and flow. Also, it could also go to a private user, that's looking for a jet that doesn't mind that it's been on charter, that doesn't mind the higher airframe time, the engine time. They like the fact that a charter company had it maintained. And so there's usually another market for individual buyers that will, you paid $3 million for this jet, and he'll pay you, 2 or 2.5, or depending on where the market kind of goes, but he'll pay you the value of it. You're not, at least based on our conversation and looking at Justin's video, we're not in the bottom of the barrel starting out kind of playground that we're working with. We're kind of a step up from that. So I wouldn't worry too much that we're looking at planes at the bottom of the barrel that are going to turn into pumpkins once you're done with them in 5 or 6 years. Goal, both from the operator's perspective and from your perspective, is let's get an asset into the business model. Let's make money with it. And then when we're done with it, let's rinse and repeat. Because why wouldn't we, if it's a good asset, a good business model, makes everybody money. So there's a symbiotic relationship there.
Do they make much? Because most everybody,
Here's what I tell everybody. If you're looking for an investment vehicle, this isn't it. Go to real estate, go do your stocks, go do your crypto, buy your own businesses, whatever you want to do, go do that. This is, either I have a need for a tax write-off, or I have a need for flying private. I'm kind of an entrepreneur. I like the aviation space. I like business. I like, rolling the dice a little bit. This is kind of a fun, sexy, side hustle that I can do that also gets me tax advantages. Oh, and I get to fly on a private jet because I have needs. for my business or for my family to actually travel, then yeah, okay, let me partner up with a charter company and offset that cost. Like, okay, maybe my hangar is going to be paid for, my pilot will be paid for, maybe my banknote will get a little bit of bite out of it, or maybe I fly and I'm only paying the wholesale rate instead of paying let's say $10,000 per flight hour, I'm paying $3,000 per flight hour, and it's only costing me $80,000 a year to fly for the amount of time I needed to fly. Meanwhile, that's saving me money. That's a write-off, and like that's the play. But I'm not looking. You're not actively saying, "Hey, Mr. Operator, take this, and I expect 6 to 10% back on my money in the first year." Like that's not this play.
Okay.
Can it make money? Yes, but no one will ever guarantee it because they're too volatile. I mean, the plane could go down. Could have a simple bird strike, and now all of a sudden you're down. The market could turn. Although even in the down markets, even where we're at now, I mean, the aviation world is still, the demand for charter is still strong, especially when you think about like, well, if the high net worth individuals aren't buying airplanes because it doesn't make sense, to get a loan on at 7-8% when they used to be 1 to 3% loans. So instead of buying the asset, they're just, they're chartering it at this point until the market becomes more favorable for people to actually buy their jets. So there's still a need for private aviation. The mid-size jets is a good category because, the price-conscious guys that are on the heavy jets, they're going to come down to the mids. The guys that are on the very light jets that need to go further, they're going up to the mids. The mids is just kind of like a sweet spot, when it comes to what the market is looking for.
Is the Dassault Falcon, is it the cheapo version of jets, which I mean is kind of funny to say, but is it
cheapo version of jet? I mean, outside of those four, I'm trying to think what else would be out there. That's kind of where you start. Okay, Saberliners. Saberliners are exactly. They were a military jet. They're actually the only executive jet that can do aerobatics. Super cool, super fast, like really. But there's like very limited number of them. Even like there's like 2 mechanics like in the United States that can work on them, and they're under $1 million. I mean, the performance is great on them when they're working, but like that would be an example of like, okay, really trying to fit a square peg in a round hole by putting a Saberliner on a 135, and I would tell you no. No, I think you're good, with the 4, between, again, it's also going to depend on the model too. I mean, if you try to put, like I said, a Citation 500 on a certificate versus a Citation XL or XLS, or better comparison would be a Citation 3, 6, or 7 versus a Citation XL or XLS. Like, then I would tell you, no, that's going the cheap route because, the Citation 3 might be, just at $1 million, but it's from the 80s versus the version, the XL. Like that would be a better example of we're at the bottom of the barrel, like really trying to scrape to make this work. Now, I don't want to put you in that because again, not only am I going to find the jet for you, but I also have to resell it for you. So I'm not trying to saddle myself with a bunch of bottom of the barrel stuff either.
How much cushion, if we're buying a jet for, let's just say, $2 or $4 million, do I need to keep 25% available credit cash for mishaps, bird strike, things like that?
Based on the option or just in terms of good practice?
Good practice. Like I want to have, like I don't want to all of a sudden you say, hey Brian, the jet needs this part, it's going to be blank dollars, or we're going to need to redo this, and that means that I'm going to need $400,000 from you, or does the operator cover all expenses when they're operating it? I don't know how those models work.
Right. So the operators, okay, it's kind of weird. The operators will be responsible for like doing the work, but the bills are going to go to you. But the operator is going to look at the revenue and they're going to look at, okay, we put X amount aside for maintenance. So while you're responsible for it, they're kind of helping you along because they're generating revenue to offset that cost. So ideally, you fly it for a year and then it's due for maintenance, and they're like, okay, it needs, $50,000 of maintenance this year. They should be able to go back into the pot, into the bank account, and say, okay, well, we brought in, $1 million of charter revenue, and here's the $100,000 we put aside, for maintenance whenever we brought a dollar in from the charter. So this $50,000 maintenance bill, yes, Brian, it's your responsibility, but don't worry, we've already put that money aside for you to take care of it. So it's kind of a both and, if you will. I mean, you're ultimately responsible for it. Let's be clear about that. But you're working hand in glove with the operator to put that money aside, so it's not like you have to stroke a check. Now, if something happens earlier, like you buy the plane, it flies for a month, and all of a sudden it needs a new windshield, and that's, $20,000 to $50,000. Maybe you haven't gotten to that status of revenue yet. You haven't generated that much revenue on it. Well, yeah, then you're going to have to stroke a check. So hopefully that makes sense. And I usually tell people, if you're buying $1 million jet, if you can't throw away $250,000 or $500,000 a year on it, like you're in the wrong playground. So to your point, yeah, I mean, having 25 to 30 or more % at any given time to spend on your jet, that's good practice. The good thing for you is if you put it with an operator, they already have that in mind. They kind of already have their costs dialed in, so that as they generate revenue, they are doing that so that the plane stays operational.
And then the revenue split, do I get a certain % per hour flown, or how do they split that up?
Yeah, every operator is going to be different. 85-15, 80-20 is kind of common for the split. I've had operators that say if you take the all the maintenance costs, then we'll give you like 100% of the split, basically. So it really kind of depends on the operator. For the most part, it's like I said, around 85-15.
Okay. And then so hypothetically, if it's a 10,000, 5,000, like the variable costs are 5,000, and they're charging 10, that 5,000, we split the 10,000. I get 8,500 and they get 1,500, kind of thing, and then all the costs, that 8,500.
Yes, that all gets handled first, and then the split happens from the profit, which is what incentivizes the charter company not to just your plane out for the lowest dollar. Because if it was split off of that, then they just be like, whatever, let's just get our coverages paid for. So here, they're well, if we can charge more, we collect more.
Now, is a good question to ask the operator how many hours the jet flies a year, and how many of those are paid for hours, and how many of those are free flying around from city to city?
And yeah, it's a valid question to ask how many of them are empty legs. What that will tell you is how efficient the operator is. If the operator where more than half their trips are empty legs, well, that tells you they're not very efficient at daisy chaining the trips to get the maximum amount of revenue per every time that thing flies.
So the larger the company, the more efficient they are, the more trips they have, the easier they're able to do this, right?
Ideally, yeah. But there are more companies that are very efficient. Paradise, I think, has 6 in their fleet. Southern Sky has 6 or 8 in their fleet. They're just very good with their marketing. They're very good with their logistics, so that as soon as they get it from Ohio to Alabama, they're already looking, okay, how we can relocate this thing to Georgia, to Atlanta, and now that's one of the biggest hubs, in the country. So now we have, a lot of options to make this thing run, for another trip. before it has to come back to pick up in Atlanta. And they'll probably get a return trip back to Georgia. So, we'll drop you off on Monday. They'll relocate it real quick, 20, 30 minutes to Atlanta, run that thing, throughout, and then probably throughout the week. And then the Sunday before they have to come get you, they'll find a flight that is relocating somebody back to Georgia or maybe Naples or Tampa, right? And then pop back over to pick you up in Atlanta. So that's what you want to see, when they have the infrastructure to do all that. Otherwise, they just drop you off and the plane just sits there and you're paying for all that. It's like, what's the point?